Welcome to the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast, episode number 78. I'm Chris, and thank you for joining us.
And I'm Jill. Chris and I are the founders of the Becoming Ellie community. If this is your first time listening to our podcast, you might wonder where that name comes from.
As legend goes, Ellie is the Norse goddess of aging who beat Thor in a wrestling match. No one expected her to do well, much less win. So we decided to name our community after her because we all want to be fit and strong like Ellie.
You can find out more about the Becoming Ellie community and this podcast at our website, becomingellie.com. Just so you know, Ellie is spelled E-L-L-I.
I'd like to remind our listeners that we're all doing the 2021 Veggie Challenge, so feel free to participate in that with us.
Our guest today talks about eating more vegetables, so I guess we're in good company.
Yeah. Elizabeth Sherman gave us a lot of great advice about being healthy and taking care of our bodies.
I think our listeners will enjoy hearing what she has to say. Let's go to the podcast. Elizabeth Sherman is a life and weight loss coach who works with mostly women to lose weight and feel better through managing easy-to-do, sustainable habits, diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management. Using certain cues, including cravings, hunger, energy, stress or mood, and sleep, she helps folks design the right health program for their body and lifestyle, and addresses the obstacles and barriers we encounter when trying to be consistent in our desired habits. We can achieve optimal health, which leads to better energy, focus, productivity, relationships, and happiness in our lives.
Elizabeth is a Chicago native, but now lives in Puerto Morelos, Mexico. And through the amazing advancements of technology, she meets with her clients online. Elizabeth is a certified life coach, nutritionist, personal trainer, and health coach. Welcome to our podcast. We're delighted to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Well, like many of us, you've been on your health journey, and I understand you underwent a major health and body transformation in your late 40s. What made you realize that you need to change? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, actually, the process started a little bit earlier than that. So it probably started in my mid to early 30s when my mom passed away. She was 65, I believe, when she passed away, and she passed away from breast cancer. And watching her body degrade and having her struggle with the disease for years. So it had been like, I don't know, maybe 12 years before that she had been going through and having treatments and so on and so forth. It was really kind of an eye-opener for me. I started Googling, like, how do I not get breast cancer? And when I was doing that, I found out that being overweight was a huge risk factor for not only getting breast cancer, but for many other diseases as well. And so that kind of starts my journey. I could see the trajectory of my life and my health habits and what I was doing. And if I didn't change something, that I was going to end up exactly how she was, what her fate was. I really didn't want to do that for myself. That was actually, the beginning of my process. Now, I would love to say that when my mom passed away and I decided to become healthier, that boom, it automatically, I changed overnight. But
you mean it doesn't work that way?
It doesn't. It probably took me a good 15 years after that to really get myself dialed in and on board. Yeah.
Okay. So which is what put you into your 40s when that transformation started?
Exactly. Well, it's when the transformation kind of wrapped up.
Okay.
And I stopped eating emotionally, and I really kind of had a come to Jesus meeting with myself and said, look, you cannot keep, because I was doing all all of the diet things, right? I was over exercising. I was restricting and then binging on the weekends. I was doing the whole diet thing of, oh, I'll just do gluten-free, or all of those fad diets. It was in my late 40s that I was like, it was like beating my head against a brick wall where I was saying to myself, what you're doing is not working. And so either A, you need to figure out how your body works and do that, because I was trying to game the system. I was trying to do the shortcuts, thinking that there was another way around it, instead of like eating my vegetables and eating like a freaking adult eats. I was trying all of the fad foods and advanced techniques that, like fasting and keto and all of that stuff. And so it was at that point where I was like, look, I need to either figure out what my body wants, and however it turns out then is how it turns out, and I need to be happy with that. And so it was really that last piece was figuring out, how do I be happy with the body that I have been given by God in the universe? And what happened then is when I started listening to my body, when I started giving it proper nutrition and exercise, not for the purpose of losing weight, but for the purpose of actually being healthy and being a responsible adult, that's when my body actually paid me back by becoming the body that I had desired in the first place. It was really kind of a closure moment. Yeah.
So that's sort of like when people are looking for a mate, a boyfriend or whatever, and they'll say you're most likely to find one when you quit looking. You're saying you found your body when you quit obsessing over it.
You lost weight when you stopped trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
And just started doing the things that you probably knew you should be doing. Yeah.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And so I started, like, first, I don't know why, but there was something in my head that I kept thinking, I'm not like most people. I don't know why. I thought that my body was totally different and defied science. And I say it out loud, but I truly thought that. I was like, oh no, I don't need to, I don't know. Like,
that doesn't apply to me.
Exactly.
Read a lot of these things, and there is that mindset that, like, if I just eat a certain food, I don't have to worry about anything else.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. And so there is a phenomenon called the health halo effect, right? And it manifests itself in two different ways. One is that, well, I brought up gluten-free before.
Right.
So that if I buy gluten-free cookies, oh, these are healthy for me, so therefore I can eat as many as I want. But they still have calories. If we overeat something that's healthy for us, and I say that in air quotes for the people who can't see me, we have those beliefs. The other way that we can look at that, the halo effect, is they did a study on people who do fun runs, like the charity 5Ks.
Right.
And find that people who incorporate exercise as part of like their identity of who they are, that those people at the end, when they're giving out bananas and protein bars and things like that, those people pick up like one or two things and like move on with their day. But the people who really don't identify as an athlete or don't walk on a regular basis, they will overcompensate with those treats that they get because they're like, I did something good. Now I deserve all of this stuff in return. That's what's called the health halo effect. Yeah.
One of the 5Ks that Jill and I did, just as he's starting to gather everyone to give out awards and things like that, he says, okay, you all did a 5K. Now you can eat as much as you want today. I mean, he actually said that on a loudspeaker. And I thought, that's kind of interesting of that mindset. This was a guy that I knew worked out at the gym. I'd seen him at the gym lots of times. And it's just funny. People do think that.
What did you do to improve your health? What did you actually do once you decided I need to be an adult?
That's a good question. Okay. I followed a couple different steps. One was I stopped over exercising. So at the time, I was going to the gym probably for an hour a day, doing like a bodybuilding type of workout. So a heavy strength training workout. And I would also run for an hour a day. So
wow.
Yeah, I was totally over exercising. And because of that, my appetite was really high. And so I was eating an excess amount of calories. And so I was really afraid at the time to stop exercising for fear that I would still have that huge appetite and I would gain all of that weight. The mentor that I had at the time, he suggested doing 20-minute workouts and then walking. And so I drastically dropped my activity level to be 20 minutes of intense, constant moving strength training. Okay. And then after that, I would walk for 30 minutes. And what I found was that my appetite actually dropped as well. And so then the second thing I started doing was paying attention to my hunger signals and noticing when I was hungry and when I wasn't. And to add on to that, then when I found myself in front of the pantry and it wasn't a scheduled meal time, asking myself, well, why am I here? Am I hungry? And if I was, then I allowed myself to eat. But if I wasn't hungry, then I started checking in with myself and asking, okay, so am I here in front of the pantry because I'm in the habit? So, that 3:00 afternoon, you need a snack type of thing.
Right.
Or was it because I was feeling emotional? Had something happened earlier in the day that I was wanting relief from? And so then in those two situations, the habit and the emotion, I would tell myself, well, first I would try to just sit with the discomfort of whatever it was. There were times though, when I said, I'm not hungry, but I'm eating anyway out of habit, or I'm not hungry, but I am eating emotionally. What that allowed me to do was quell the response. So I could have like just a little bit of chocolate instead of eating the whole bar, for example.
So acknowledging I really don't need to be eating this, but I'm going to eat it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or just a little bit.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that health changes for women over the age of 45, kind of thinking of hormonal changes and how that might have affected you personally or people in general?
Absolutely. Health changes. So what happens is because women over the age of 45, our bodies are preparing to move on to the next phase of our life where we're not going to be childbearing anymore. Our hormones shift, right? Two things happen to women over the age of 45. One, which is our bodies become more insulin sensitive. And we also become more reactive to stress. And so what that means is as younger women, we could eat cake or eat a bunch of pasta or whatever. And then on the weekend, then go work it off, have a more intense workout and, use the whole calories in versus calories out approach, which for all practical purposes is still the foundation of weight maintenance, right? That if you eat more than your body is burning, then you'll gain weight. And if you eat less, you'll lose weight. And if you eat the same, you'll maintain. And those rules still apply. However, we also have to now pay attention to our hormonal response. And so what happens is if we overeat those starches, those sweets, those foods that we all really like, and then we try to work it off, what happens is our body just goes into this weird hormonal response. To get into a little bit of science here, when we eat, our blood sugar rises. Our body releases insulin to take that glycogen out of our blood and store it into our muscles or liver. And whatever is left over, it goes into fat. then our blood sugar drops. And if we eat again, then the whole process happens again. If we start to then over-exercise, then we have a stress response on top of that. It just puts us into a bad spiral of eating and then stressing out. If anything's going to prevent us from losing weight, it's stress for sure.
Because of the hormonal implications of stress on our body.
Yeah.
And are you talking basically about cortisol when you're talking about the hormonal stress?
Exactly. Well, not only cortisol, but then also your two other hormones, leptin and ghrelin, which tell the body that we're hungry, that tell the body that we've had enough as well. Okay. So ghrelin is the hormone that tells us that we're getting hungry. And then leptin is a hormone that's stored in our fat cells, and it regulates our hunger as well.
Good. Thanks.
A lot of us figure out ways to lose weight, but have a hard time actually keeping that weight off. And it puts us on this never-ending pattern of losing and gaining weight and feeling pretty miserable at times about it. So what's the secret to lasting weight loss?
That is a loaded question, isn't it?
That's a question we all want to know.
Yeah, I know. It's
right.
Sometimes I think it's harder to maintain a weight loss than it is to actually lose the weight.
Yeah. One is I talked about my body's hunger signals. And there's a tool that I use with my clients called a body scan. And what the body scan does is it allows us to check to see if we are hungry or not and get in touch with our body's hunger signals. I think that one of the things, in addition to hunger signals, the other thing that is really super important is for us to start becoming aware of how food makes us feel. Well, so here, let me explain that. For example, last February, I started noticing that because I've just recently entered menopause. And so I started noticing that I was getting hot flashes during the day. I didn't really like it. And I was getting hot flashes at night, and it's just uncomfortable. And so what I started doing was I started manipulating my starches, lowering the amount of flour and sugar that I was taking in. That's just one example of starting to notice how food makes you feel. When I started doing that, my hot flashes drastically reduced. The secret to lasting weight loss then is starting to notice how food makes you feel, how different foods impact how you feel tomorrow, the next day, and the next week. Something else that will give me hot flashes is also alcohol. Really starting to connect the dots between our lifestyle factors and how that makes us feel. And then the other piece to that is, again, going back to the emotional eating, being aware that when we eat for emotional reasons, we're eating to solve a problem. But when we eat, the problem actually doesn't get solved. And so really being able to pay attention to that emotion and honoring it and staying in the emotion versus numbing through food, alcohol, social media, shopping, or whatever your numbing of choice is.
You've kind of talked a little bit about eating less and moving more and how that is a kind of edict for losing weight. And I'm wondering what you think of that and what do you tell your clients about that?
Yes. Again, calories in versus calories out is still the foundation of weight loss, weight maintenance, and weight gain. That if we eat more calories than we move, or that our bodies burn rather, then we will gain weight. But I don't think that the eat less, move more advice is actually helpful, because women over the age of 45 can no longer use exercise as a form of the calories out approach because of what I said earlier, which is exercise actually becomes a stress. And so we need to look at exercise not as a tool to burn calories, but as a form of self-care. We need to start looking at exercise as a way of managing our stress, of taking care of our body. We really can't use the move more approach to be the calories out side of the equation. To be honest, if we're using exercise as a tool for calories out, we're probably going to be putting in a lot more effort than we feel the payoff is. In other words, if I'm strength training and I'm burning, let's say, 250 calories in that hour of strength training, then I'm probably not going to see the benefit of the calories out, right? I'm not going to see the benefit of the exercise. Now, that's not to say that there aren't really important reasons why we should exercise. There are tons of different reasons why we should exercise: for mental clarity, for creating healthier bones and muscles, for the metabolism that ultimately is sped up through exercise. However, by only looking at the hour that I'm spending exercising as the portion of calories out, it's unhelpful. And what we should be doing instead, if we are looking at calories in versus calories out, is it's a lot easier to eat fewer than 250 calories than it is to burn off those 250 calories.
Yeah, okay, I can think of a cookie that one cookie is 250 calories, and it's really not worth an hour in the gym for one lousy cookie.
Exactly. Yeah, because when you start to notice, and I love fitness trackers, but when you start to notice, I burned, 500 calories on that walk, which would be a long walk, but I just ate 600 calories in ice cream or something, then you're like, why did I just negate that long walk?
And so what you're saying is that there's plenty of health reasons to be doing exercise or being fit, but our goal probably should not be, let's do this because it's going to help me lose weight. Exactly.
Yeah. Again, mental clarity, strengthening your heart muscles, stress management. I mean, seriously, for all of you women who are out there who do not like exercise, who do not have a good relationship with exercise, what we can do is once you exercise, and this is what I tell my clients. So every morning I sit on the couch and I drink a cup of coffee. I have to force myself every single day to go exercise. Okay. So even for me, who's been doing this for years, I battle going out and actually exercising, but I always remember how I feel on the other side of that exercise. So if you have a poor relationship with exercise, what I'm going to invite you to do is notice how you feel after you go for a walk. You're probably going to feel pretty good. And so if you can remember how you feel on the other side of exercise, then you can probably talk yourself through it. Because we have two different parts of our brain. We have what's called the higher brain and we have the lower brain. So when we want to go lose weight, our higher brain decides that that's what we want to do. That's the goal, is to lose 20 pounds. And how we're going to do it is we're going to cut out these foods and we're going to exercise this much. And this is how long it's going to take. We also have something that's called our lower brain. Now, our lower brain, unlike the higher brain, which is the planning side, is very emotional. The lower brain functions on the here and now. The lower brain works off of what's called the Motivational Triad. The Motivational Triad is the belief that the lower brain wants to avoid pain, it wants to seek pleasure, and it wants to do it as efficiently as possible. For all of us who are like, I told myself that I was going to exercise and then I didn't do it. I don't understand why. Well, that's because the lower brain is like, exercise is painful. Sitting on the couch is pleasurable. And so it's avoiding pain and it's seeking pleasure, and it's doing it as efficiently as possible by, doing the status quo. So in order to get ourselves to exercise, we have to get over that initial objection that our lower brain is offering us by seeking the pleasure on the other side of the discomfort, which is the pleasure on the other side of exercising.
Okay, so there's a little bit of future rewards. You have to sort of bribe yourself. Do this and you'll feel better.
Well, absolutely, because on any decision that we make, there's pleasure and there's discomfort. Either we have discomfort on the front end and pleasure on the other, or it's vice versa. So an example of that is, overeating cookies. So it's pleasurable in the moment, but I may have discomfort on the other side of it, which is either overeating or in 2 weeks or a month when I can't button my pants, right? Which may or may not even happen.
Right. What about cravings? So this maybe ties into all of this, but, plenty of us crave sweets or salty foods. What advice do you have for us about cravings?
Cravings can happen for a number of reasons. Cravings can either be habitual. Every day at 3:00, I have chocolate. And so therefore I'm just rewarding myself with eating chocolate every day at 3:00. So of course our brain is immediately at, 2:59 going to go, oh, I have a chocolate craving. We start habits for one reason, and then we carry them through for another. Now, why we start habits is a different topic. We could start that 3:00 craving for a number of reasons. One that I find with my clients is often if we don't sleep well, our body's cells do not generate energy correctly. And so if we don't sleep properly at night, then what will happen is we'll find ourselves at 3:00 having an energy slump, and our brain immediately knows that the easiest way of getting energy is through a simple carbohydrate like, pretzels or chips or a cookie. The other reason why we might have that afternoon sugar craving or salty craving, whatever it is, your drug of choice, is because we maybe didn't give ourselves enough protein earlier in the day. And this is actually a situation that happened with one of my clients. Is she was like, oh, I love eating cereal for breakfast, or I just need a banana and some toast. And we switched her over to a higher protein. We had some carbs in there already, but she was used to eating a little bit more protein for a while. She was on a business trip, and in the hotel, they had just one of those continental breakfasts.
Right.
And so for breakfast, she had oatmeal and yogurt, which for all practical purposes, right, that's a healthy breakfast, right? It's probably the best thing that you could have. But what she found was when she was in her office, she was scavenging around for pretzels. And she was like, what am I doing? Why am I looking for something in the afternoon when she was so out of the habit? And she traced it back to that breakfast, that she hadn't had enough protein in the breakfast. So her blood sugar was dropping mid-afternoon and she needed something to pick up. So there are lots of reasons why we might have cravings, from habit to things that we did earlier in the day or overnight that might contribute to our body needing energy.
Next day, did she grab a hard-boiled egg from the Continental and then sneak that at like 2:30?
Yeah, right.
And peel and, You mentioned habits because, well, this is still close enough to New Year's, but I've been reading a lot about habits and trying to understand the cue reward kind of cycle, the routines and all. And I was wondering if you could talk to us about what you suggest we do to create new good habits and how we keep them going.
When we're trying to establish good habits, and actually this is even true if we want to get rid of habits, there are 3 different ways that I suggest to my clients that we introduce those or wean ourselves off. Okay. One is, I think that far too often, especially when it comes to New Year's resolutions, we bite off way more than we can chew. Folks who do New Year's resolutions, they completely overhaul their lives. They're like, oh, I'm going to eat, 1,200 calories and I'm going to start this intense exercise regimen. We can't sustain it because it's really super uncomfortable. And eventually we get hurt or tired or lethargic, or we're overtraining, or we're hungry. Going back to that lower brain again of seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and doing it as efficiently as possible, that lower brain is going to offer us the idea of this is too hard, or this isn't worth it, or we stand on the scale and we're like, I can't do this anymore for this low payoff. Okay. And so to avoid having that lower brain offer us those negative thoughts, which are always going to derail us, what I suggest is that we start super, super simple, doing the bare freaking minimum. So for many of my clients, what that means is that we'll start off by eating 1 serving of vegetables per day. How that can also turn into getting rid of a bad habit. So let's say that you're drinking alcohol every night and you want to reduce that. Instead of going from drinking alcohol every night to not drinking alcohol every night, maybe lowering the number of drinks that you have. So going from 3 drinks to 2, just making small steps in the direction of where you want to go. Now, you would think that from going from 1 serving of vegetables, the next step would be to go to 2 servings of vegetables. But I'm not going to suggest that. I'm going to suggest instead that you start to stagger the number of vegetables. So instead of going from 1 immediately to 2, because that's doubling it, and that could actually even be difficult for so many people. Instead of doing that, go to 2 servings, maybe 3 days a week. And decide ahead of time which days you're actually going to do it. Because if you say, okay, this week, 3 days, I'm going to do 2 servings, then it's going to come to Friday and you haven't done it. And now you're going to be like, well, now I'm screwed. I'm not going to do it at all.
Right.
So decide ahead of time, okay, I'm going to do it on Monday, I'm going to do it on Tuesday, and I'm going to do it on Thursday. And then slowly start to inch your way up into adding more vegetables to your diet. There's the idea of frequency, and then there's the idea of density. So frequency being the number of days that you eat vegetables, and then density being the number of vegetables that you would have within a day. On the other side of that, we have, if you want to get rid of a habit, so then I talked about drinking too much wine, for example. So let's say that the first week you cut your drinks down from 3 to 2. Then instead of going from 2 to 1, you might decide that 2 of those days you're going to go to 1, but you're going to have 2 on the other days. So you see how that works with frequency and density then.
That's very helpful.
Do you recommend that your clients eat a certain way? Do you tell them to reduce carbs, fat, whatever? Or do you tell them to give up dairy, meat? Anyway, what advice do you give your clients?
I help my clients discover the right eating method for them. So you asked about cravings earlier.
Right.
And cravings are actually part of what I call the 5 biomarkers that tell us whether our eating, our sleep, and our exercise is right for our bodies. And so those 5 different things are cravings. So if you're eating right for your body, you shouldn't have high cravings. Your appetite should be low. your energy should be stable, your sleep should be good, and then you should also have a stable mood. So those are the 5 biomarkers that I use with my clients to determine the right amount of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates for their body, as well as how much exercise they should have in their day and how much sleep they should be getting.
Oh, okay.
Now, that being said, a lot of people come to me and they're like, are you going to give me a meal plan? I don't do that either. And it's really kind of a different approach. I like the idea of giving my clients more things, working on the idea of what's called displacement. So adding more vegetables into their day, adding more water into their day, adding more lean proteins, therefore crowding out the things that are lower in nutrients and higher in calories. Also adding in more exercise, therefore crowding out more sedentary behaviors. So I like the idea of adding things to our day that we want more of, with the idea that we lose then the things that we don't want to be doing. I will occasionally tell my clients not to do something. It's pretty rare, but like, for example, if we find that they are having really intense cravings and they just can't get over it, or they're stuck at a plateau for a period of time, I may offer that they give up sugar and or flour for a period of time, like a month, and then we can start adding it back in just to see, again, like I talked about earlier, how food makes us feel. Because when we eliminate a food from our diet for a period of time, then we can start to see the negative effects of it. So people often see this with dairy also, that they have, just some low grade sluggishness. If we take dairy out and see how they feel and then add it back in, then they can really connect the dots between, oh yeah, I had cheese or I had milk. And then the next day I really felt like my joints were aching, for example. I don't really tell people what to do. I will do it in the spirit of experimentation to see if it's something that their body enjoys or doesn't enjoy. I'm really not the expert in their body. I see the client relationship with myself as being kind of a co-creatorship of their lifestyle factors, because I know nutrition, I know exercise, and all of the science behind it, but they know their body, they know their lifestyle. And so together we can really create the series of habits that are good for them.
What about you? How do you eat? Do you have a certain way that you prefer to eat? Do you follow the same recommendations that you tell your clients?
Well, yeah, absolutely. My diet has been a continuous form of self-discovery. There was a period of time that I needed to have breakfast every day. And then about a year, it was January of 2020, I guess. And not for any diet related reasons, I stopped eating breakfast. And so I kind of do an intermittent fasting type of thing now.
Okay.
And I'm really reluctant to talk about how I eat because I don't want people to believe that because I'm eating this way, that they should eat this way too. Everyone's body is completely different. Because I eat 2 meals and have a snack in between doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right diet for you. Like my clients some of them are eating 6 meals a day. Some of them are eating 3 meals and a snack. Some of them are eating 3 meals and 2 snacks. Some of them are eating 1 meal a day. So it's really a process of figuring out what works for each person. Now, that being said, yeah, it is a process of as I've gotten older. So as I mentioned, last February, I started getting hot flashes. And so I kind of had to tweak my diet a little bit and figure out how am I going to manage that? Or could I manage it with diet? Because I'm always going to try and do that first before I go to any sort of medication or hormones or something like that. For the most part, my lunch consists of either a salad or what I call a bowl, which is just a bunch of vegetables with quinoa and black beans, or I'll make like a batch of soup on the weekends and then I'll eat that throughout the week. So I really try to overload my vegetables into my lunch meal. That way I don't have to be really concerned about it for my dinner meals.
And you are not opposed to the intermittent fasting if it works for you.
Right. Yeah. I used to be. I was really adamant against intermittent fasting, mainly because myself and many of my clients had food issues. For people who have food scarcity issues, it's really common for us then to overeat in the evening because we're like, oh, I haven't eaten enough. Then we overeat at night. If that's the mindset that one of my clients is in, then I will generally steer them away from intermittent fasting and prefer to have them eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, the other thing to think about is I also prefer that people eat around the time that they are most active. So if you're most active in the morning, then that's when you want to be eating most of your calories. And if you're less active in the evening, you probably want to taper those. So something else to think about in terms of like energy balance is, eating around the times that you're most active.
I tend to be more active in the morning or early afternoon, but that tendency is to then want to eat later. So yeah, that's probably good advice. So sort of switching the conversation, topic a little bit, you talk about it being important to deal with stress, and how can we manage our stress? What advice do you give us for that?
It was really interesting for me as a, let's say, younger health coach and personal trainer in that I would observe my clients get really consistent with their eating and their exercise habit. And then something would happen in their lives that would just throw it all out of whack. And it was always something stress related. So whether they had to, take care of a parent or their job got busy or something, stress would prevent my clients then from being able to take proper care of themselves. And it was always really frustrating for me that most of the advice that we have about stress is things like go get a manicure or get a massage or a facial. And I think that those things are amazing. If you're doing them, don't stop. But those things really tend to be very, what's the word? Like Band-Aidy?
Expensive.
Well, and expensive. Yeah, absolutely. You can't do it every day. And so
time consuming. I was thinking of a lot of words.
Exactly. But they're also very on the other side of it. So once you have the stress, do these things to escape the stress. At the beginning of the show, you introduced me as a life and weight loss coach, and that is what I call myself because I am a certified life coach. The reason that I did that was because these other areas of my clients' lives, their relationships or money or all of these other stressors would get in the way of them being able to take care of themselves. And so by being a life coach, I can help my clients reframe their problems because that's all that stress is, right? Mm-hmm. It's how we look at our problems. We know that two people can experience the same exact event and have very different stress responses from it. What we can take away from that is that I don't want to say that stress is all in our mind, but it's how we look at our problem. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually preventively take care of our stress by managing how we think about our problems? I don't know that I have a really good answer for you in terms of how do we manage our stress. Definitely exercise is going to be part of it. But again, that's the other side of already having the stress.
Right.
But if we can look at our problems, if we can look at our stress from a different point of view and ask the question, what would I do if I felt confident about this? Or how would I feel, or how is this happening for me instead of to me? So being more empowered in the situation instead of, victimy. That's not to say that we should walk around with, rainbows and unicorns all the time. We should have negative emotion. Negative emotion isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's when we're in a rush to get out of that negative emotion that then we start going to the numbing behaviors that we talked about earlier, like overeating or drinking or, shopping or gambling or whatever. Really understanding that negative emotion is going to be there. It's okay. Negative emotion creates contrast in our lives, because we can't feel positive emotion unless we feel negative emotion.
That's what I'm going to say next time I'm really stressed. Well, this is a good contrast.
Right?
I'm going to try to hang on to that because we all have stress, similar to stress, and that is sleep. I struggle with my sleep and have for years now, and really try to gather tips from everyone that I meet about how to improve sleep, steps that I can do differently, and that type of thing. And I was just wondering if you have any tips, suggestions, or thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. One, I think that how problem sleeping manifests for you is going to determine the answer I give. Okay.
So my kind of sleep is waking up in the middle of the night worrying about my stress. I can fall asleep pretty easily.
Okay.
But staying asleep is much more difficult.
Okay. There are a couple different things. One is I will typically suggest to my clients that they create a bedtime routine. Now, it doesn't have to be really fancy. It doesn't have to be candles and tea and meditation and stuff like that. It can be as simple as a series of habits that you do on a routine basis that mentally prepares your brain for getting ready to sleep. So things like making coffee for the next day, and also being aware if you are sensitive to coffee or caffeine, maybe cutting that down earlier in the day. Let's see, what else? Putting your clothes out the night before, washing your face, brushing your teeth, your personal hygiene. But then this is also something that I've found is really helpful for many of my clients, which is what's called a to-do list download or a thought download. So before you go to bed at night, one of the last things that you can do is review your schedule for the following day, write down a list of everything that's in your brain that you have to do or that you're worried about. And that can help take some of the burden off of waking up in the middle of the night. Now, when you wake up in the middle of the night, there are a few visualization exercises that I offer my clients, but the other thing is judging being awake doesn't help you to go back to sleep. And so if you can get rid of some of that judgment of, I shouldn't be awake, it can actually be really helpful in terms of accepting it, noticing if you're feeling a specific emotion and really kind of feeling that emotion as opposed to trying to push it away. So those are the tips that I kind of have for proper sleep. Oh, and I also want to mention that sometimes we wake up in the middle of the night because of what we've eaten earlier in the day. Okay. So if you can kind of connect the dots between what you've eaten and whether you're waking up in the middle of the night, sometimes that can also help by eliminating that stuff.
Good.
I know I have noticed that alcohol, if I have it, well, maybe not if I just have one, but if I have like two, I can pretty much count on that I'm going to wake up at 2 a.m.
I think it changes your brain waves because they just don't stay in that state.
I guess. Yeah.
Thank you, though. That's very helpful because I know about the to-do list, but I don't consciously do that all the time. I'm going to go back to doing a to-do list all the time, things that I worry about.
Because the things you worry about aren't necessarily on your to-do list.
No,
right.
Well, they're things you really can't do a whole lot about, or at least for me, and that's what wakes me up.
Right.
And then it churns because I'm not fully awake. And, anyway, I won't go on and on about it, but thank you. That's very helpful.
I know you left the US and moved to Mexico, and I just sort of wondered, what's it like moving to a new country?
Oh, wow. Moving to Mexico was probably the most difficult thing that I have ever done. It was way more difficult than I expected it to be. Not only is there a shift in language, but also measurements, culture is totally different. Yeah, our lives are completely different. And we did it because we wanted a simpler way of living. We lived in Austin, Texas, and my husband and I don't have children. We lived in a 5-bedroom house with 4 bathrooms. It was way too big for us. We had a pool, we had 3 cars, and we were working basically to maintain our lifestyle. Whenever we would visit Mexico, well, first of all, about 10 or so years ago, we spent a month in Belize on the beach. And that was really the beginning of the process. It was the idea of, could we do this? And at the time, the internet wasn't good enough. As a coach, I was doing personal training back then. And so I couldn't bring my business online 100%. But in 2015, my husband and I, we would visit different towns in Mexico with the idea that we would eventually move here. And so in 2015, we found the town that we currently live in. We stayed here. And it was kind of like, it kind of meets all of our criteria for where we want to live. We're about 20 minutes from the Cancun airport. And so if we needed to get back to the States quickly, we could do that. Both of our parents are a little bit older. So yeah, it checked all the boxes for us. And it took us about 18 months to sell all of our possessions and sell our house. And at that time, the internet was good enough. My husband is a chief technology officer for a software company. And I brought my business 100% online at that point. And it's just worked out really well. We've been renting a house for the 4 years, and we are in the process of building. We just bought land, and now we're building our own house. So it's actually really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is exciting.
Mm-hmm. So how did it change your healthcare coaching business? You said you brought it all online. So what's that been like?
It was hard. It was hard because the women that I work with are women over the age of 45. And so I think that our age group is a little bit less of early adopters. I think that many of the followers that I have like what I have to say, but I don't know that they would immediately go to someone online. They prefer to go to someone in person, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what we're used to. I am probably one of the few people who can say that sheltering in place and COVID actually really helped my business, and that it allowed women who wanted to lose weight, now that they couldn't see people in person, that now they had to seek someone online. And it didn't really matter if I was in Mexico, if I was in their town, they were forced to do it online. It's really changed my business 100% in that it's a little bit easier now for people to accept that I can help them through Zoom. And so many people are comfortable on Zoom now, where a year ago we weren't, right?
Right. Yeah. How many video calls did, the average person go on? And now that's how you meet with your family and so much of it. Right. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So I saw on your website that you were on House Hunters International. What was that experience like?
Yes, we were on House Hunters International. That was so much fun. So we actually did the show. It was 5 days of taping, all boiled down to 20 minutes, I think.
So you looked at 3 places and then compared and contrast and then picked one. And so it makes sense that it's 5 days, but It's amazing how much taping goes into 20 minutes.
Exactly. They didn't do a lot of scripting. So the storyline is 100% ours, but it may sound scripted because when we walked into a room, we had to do that like 2 or 3 times sometimes so that they could get different camera angles, and the camera would be on me versus both of us versus my husband or the realtor. And
I was wondering if any of our listeners wanted to follow you or find you on the internet, where would you say that is the best place for them to find you?
Well, I guess it depends on how they like to use the internet. So if they like to do social media, then they can find me on Instagram at eSherman68. I'm on Facebook at Total Health by Eliz. Or they can listen to my podcast. I just started my own podcast, which is called Done with Dieting. As of our recording right now, I'm on episode number 7. And
nice.
So that's been tons of fun. Or if they don't do any of those things, well, I'm assuming that they do podcasts. But if they don't do any of those things, then you can find me on my website, which is elizabethsherman.com.
Great. Thank you. We'll make sure we link to all of those on our show notes.
Awesome.
And on your website, there are links at least to the podcast.
Yeah.
So they could go there and find both. Okay.
Yeah. And I have tons of free content on my website as well. Like I have tons of those 20-minute workouts that I was talking about. I have an amazing guide and email sequence that follows up with that, which is called the 8 Basic Habits That Healthy People Do. It's the tool that I actually use with many of my clients. So there are 8 habits. None of them are revolutionary. You know what all of them are already. Things like drinking water, eating vegetables, moving, sleeping, don't eat too much, and limiting your treats are some of them. When you get that guide, you'll also get this really motivating email sequence that goes along with it. And you get like an email every other day for like 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. And that's actually really helpful for those folks who want to just be healthier. And if you do these 8 basic things, your body will, what I call, right size. If you have weight to lose, you will lose the weight.
Thank you so much for being on our show today. We really appreciate you being with us and sharing your experiences.
Yes,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thanks for having me. This has been so much fun.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye. I loved the idea that when we choose to focus on learning what's best for our bodies and concentrate more on being healthy, that our bodies respond. Also, what works for me may not work for you.
Yes, I thought it was really interesting when Elizabeth was talking about habits, and she talked about frequency and density. And, you know, it's so often that you think, oh, I'm going to add 2 vegetables each day to my diet. And then the next week, 3 vegetables. And instead she talked about, you know, just kind of ramping things up more slowly, because, you know, when you take a little bit and add to it, you don't overhaul your life all at once. And it just is easier to achieve what you're trying to reach, I think. So I really enjoyed when she talked about that.
Yeah. And, you know, I this week, for some reason, got it into my head that I was going to quit drinking caffeine.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really? Wow.
So, which was, I don't know why, but at any rate, so one day I just decided, all right, I'm not drinking caffeine. Well, then I got a headache, and I thought, you know what? I suspect this is not the way you're supposed to go off of caffeine. You probably should taper. So it's the exact same thing. Instead, if you're going to add something, you do it gradually. If you're going to take something away, maybe do it gradually. She did talk about that with, if you're going to quit drinking alcohol, I did it with caffeine.
Yeah. Well, I know one time I tried to follow some program that was through my gym, and they had all these different things that they wanted you to give up cold turkey. And caffeine, oh my gosh, I remember it was 1 PM and I'm still staring at my computer and it couldn't get one thing done. I'm such a habit of using caffeine. So instead I stepped down to using less caffeine, and that really helped.
Yeah. Well, but the whole habit thing was interesting. You're right. And she had lots of good ideas about getting vegetables into your day. And
I love that.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting when she was talking about over-exercising. You know, unlike many of, I don't want to say many of our listeners, but, you know, we all tend to think, I think that, you know, an hour a day of exercising is awesome. And I wish I was doing more of that now, but she seemed to, caution about over exercising. And I thought that was quite interesting.
Well, she was doing a lot. So when she does it, she said her workout is about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. And then she does it 20. It was just under an hour to do both the cardio and the strength work that she was talking about.
Right. Well, she was doing cardio and strength, and it sounded like every day.
Yes.
And that your body wouldn't rebuild.
Extensive cardio on top of the strength. So yeah. I could see where that would just break your body down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but yes, that is interesting. Usually people are saying exercise more, but that was good advice, I think, to don't go to the other extreme.
Exactly. Well, I'd love to hear what our listeners think about Elizabeth's advice. Do you do any of the things that she mentioned? Let us know by coming to the Becoming Ellie website and, fill out the contact form, or on any of our social media websites. We'd love to hear from you. Or you can send us an email. My email is chris@becomingellie.com.
We'd love to help you on your journey to health and fitness. If you're looking for an online community, be sure to follow us on our Facebook page and then join our private Facebook group where we encourage and support each other.
We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and YouTube too. Don't forget to sign up for our email list so that you don't miss any of the articles or podcasts. And you can sign up at becomingellie.com.
If you are looking for ideas for getting more vegetables in your day, you definitely want to check out the articles on our website.
Oh, yeah. What a good idea. I'm looking forward to talking to you again on our next episode of the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast.
I am too. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.